Hello folks! Today I want to talk to you about Etsy and more precisely selling on Etsy versus selling on your own platform, your own website. So I've had an Etsy shop for about 3 years now and my own website for about a year, and I think that's a okay time to be able to make some comparisons, and because I've had people ask me about these things, I thought why not share them. And some time ago I wrote a blog post on this topic, a long blog post, which actually at the time of making this video I haven't even posted yet because I went back and edited it and thought about it and added things so many times. And at this point it has become so long that I'm not sure anyone would want to read it anymore, which is why I thought maybe I should make a video companion to that blog post as well. So the people who don't want to read a novel-length blog post can just watch a video, which, who knows, that might end up being long as well. One more thing before we start. There might be some difference between the blog post and the video. I'm not using the blog post as a script. I'm basically going over the same points, but in a more conversational tone. So there might be value in both watching the video and reading the post, but also I think it's fine if you just do one of those things or neither. Oh, and one more thing before we start. A little disclaimer. This is my experience. This is my opinion. This is how things have been for me. I'm also talking about this topic from the perspective of someone based in Denmark. I feel like most English-speaking videos on any topic out there tend to be very much from the perspective of someone living in the US. So this one will be a bit different. Also, while writing the blog post, I realized that my perspective might come off somewhat negative, but that's just how I see things. That's the reality for me in this moment as I'm making this post or video or whatever. I think a lot of similar content out there comes from the perspective of someone who is selling a product, usually some kind of course on how to sell on Etsy or something along those lines, which I think makes the content or the advice they share to be biased towards positivity, because of course they want more people to start their shops and buy their courses. I have no such agenda because I'm not selling any courses. I'm only selling postcards. Please buy my postcards. So I think that makes my perspective a bit more fair and honest, but again, I have my own biases, we all do, be warned. Seek as much information as you can on the topics that interest you, because I think that's the only way to really get to the true core of things and begin to really get a clear picture of reality. I don't know what I'm saying. Basically, don't let this be the only video about Etsy you watch if you're someone who is interested in opening an Etsy shop. And take everything with a pinch of salt or a bucket, I don't care. So this has already been a really lengthy intro, so let's get into it. So first of all, let's talk about Etsy. Personally, I've always wanted to sell on Etsy since I knew that Etsy was a place that existed and people sold on it. I've always wanted to have my little shop where I sell my own things that I make. I thought it would be a lot of fun. I've watched a lot of people packing orders, sending things, and I just thought it seemed cozy and I wanted to have the experience. But for the longest time I didn't have a product, I didn't have anything to sell, so I didn't have a shop. That changed in 2019 when I started my little card collection. In short, in 2018, my parents visited me in Copenhagen and they were looking for some small souvenirs to bring to relatives, and we felt like the souvenirs were very generic, which we didn't quite expect because Denmark is supposed to be this very design, art-oriented whatever place, and sure, there are these kind of art souvenirs, but they're also more expensive. The general stuff you find in the souvenir shops is basically Little Mermaid figurines made in China and postcards with photographs from places in Copenhagen. Pretty normal. And back then I joked that I can make better cards than this. So over time I kind of did, and I made some mock-ups of them. I shared them with people who are foreigners living in Denmark, and they felt like they really represented their experience and they were interested in buying them. So I made a small print run and started selling them. So now I finally had a product and finally opened an Etsy shop. It opened in the end of September 2019. I have a bunch of videos where I was documenting the process of setting up and all these things. You can go back and watch them. They're probably pretty cringe, but that's okay. And so I started my experience with Etsy. And so came my first impressions. At first I felt mostly positive about it, so let's start with the pros of opening an Etsy shop. First of all, based on my initial research, because I know there are more places than Etsy where you can open a shop, but based on my research at the time, Etsy was the cheapest place. And one of the things that made it even cheaper is that the fees you pay are not paid up front. So the only thing that you pay up front is a listing fee, which is very low. It's about 1 krona. That's in Danish money. But it is very cheap. Also, when you open a shop for the first time, you can use someone's referral link, which will give you 40 free listings. You can use mine. I'll put it in the description. I used the friends, so that was nice. Basically, the first 40 products you list, you can list for free. And whenever you get a sale, that's when fees will be deducted from your earnings. So you don't really feel that you're paying for anything. Well, but you still are. But you don't feel it so much. The second thing that is really, really good with Etsy is that it's very easy, very beginner friendly, very user friendly. You basically go through a series of steps that you're being guided through, where you're being told, okay, now list your product, now add a photo, now add a description, now come up with a title, now think of what you will charge for postal expenses and so on. So even if there's something that you didn't think about, Etsy basically tells you, well, think about it. I would recommend that you don't wait to the last moment when you're feeling these things to think about those things, especially the postage and packaging and all that. I would recommend that before you start, you do quite a bit of research on all the things you need to run a shop. That's what I did, and I'm happy I did because I had a lot of things ready once I was doing the setup. But even if you haven't done that, you might also solve these problems as they come. Next thing, that is a bit of a double-edged sword, but right now we are talking about the positives, is that Etsy is a marketplace, which means that it's basically like a big digital mall, a big place where people go to shop. And under Etsy's roof, there is lots and lots of tiny little shops that basically rent space on it. Why that is a good thing is all these people who come to this platform, they're already looking for something, and because of Etsy's search and organization of all the data that's on Etsy, all that makes it easy for them to find your shop. When you are on your own, when you are your own shop, it's a lot harder for potential customers to get connected to you or to find you. Especially at first, you have to basically go find them yourself and tell them, come to my shop, which is a lot of work. On Etsy, once you have a product that people look for and are interested in, and once you've kind of optimized your shop with all the descriptions and photos and tags and all that, it is fairly easy to be found. Well, easy is relative because there's also a lot of competition and a lot of other similar shops. I think for me, it's been quite lucky that my product is extremely niche. There are others selling postcards and mostly posters to do with Denmark, but there are not that many. And of course, there are not that many people who search for that kind of stuff either. So I've had people finding me pretty much since I started. I think my very first customers were people who were following me online or real life friends, which is completely normal. Your first customers will probably be your friends. But over time, you start seeing orders by people who you have no idea who they are and how they found you, and that's because the marketplace works. My next point is somewhat related to the first one, and it's all about trust on Etsy. Because Etsy is this big established platform, it is already known and people trust it. They know that when they shop on Etsy, sure, there might be fake shops, there might be scammers, there might be all kinds of people, but they can somewhat at least rely that if things go wrong, they can complain to the Etsy customer service and they can probably get a refund. Even if the seller refuses to pay a refund, sometimes Etsy will decide that it is fair for the customer to get a refund, so they will force the seller to pay a refund, or they will basically pay it on your behalf and then they'll take the money from you. This hasn't happened to me, but I have read about it in forums and Etsy groups, so I know that it happens. I'm sure it's not fun for the seller, especially when they feel they haven't done anything wrong, but that's for the cons. So my point here basically is that the internet is big, and when you don't know who you're dealing with up front, it's not someone you've been following or you know personally, it could be hard to throw your money at this random shop without knowing what's on the other side. And Etsy makes that a little bit easier. And that's good for you as a seller because you can sort of borrow Etsy's reputation, and that might be the nudge the potential customer needs to buy from your shop. While on your own platform, it can be much harder to earn that trust and to look reliable enough for someone to make an order. Another maybe smaller point in the pro section is that Etsy can help you spread your brand's reach, so to say. You will be exposed to more people that normally you probably wouldn't be, and sometimes you might get orders that you wouldn't otherwise because people found you on Etsy, and that's usually would be something more customized. For example, I've had people contact me about making custom cards for custom events such as weddings and birthdays and stuff like that, because they found my shop, they liked the vibe, what I already have in my shop. It's not quite fitting what they need, but they can message me and ask me, hey, would you do this thing for my event in your style? And now you have some extra work and extra income. That's nice. Next up, we have taxes and fees, which are never fun, but Etsy makes some of those a little more manageable. So, for example, a big chunk of my customers on Etsy come from abroad, especially from outside the EU, which makes things complicated. Every country has its own rules, and you can't know all of them. For example, I have noticed with a lot of the US-based customers that they all have these different fees that are being charged in different states. I imagine it's maybe something like the VAT in Europe, but the percentage differs from place to place, and I will be very confused if I have to deal with that myself. But what Etsy does is they charge the correct percentage and they pay it to the authorities that need to receive that amount on your behalf, so you don't have to worry about it. The same now applies to the UK after Brexit. Before that, there was nothing special, but now they add the UK VAT and also pay that. On the other hand, when it comes to the VAT and taxes that are required in Denmark, for example, they don't really do anything with that, which is fine because I do it. And when it comes to paying income tax, that's on you to keep track of and pay when the time comes. I'm also VAT registered, so I have to keep track of that. It can be very complicated and confusing because You have to charge it for some countries, and you don't charge it for other countries. Also, it differs whether the buyer is a private person or a company, where are they based, this and that. This is a lot of extra stuff that we're not going to get into right now, also because I'm not a tax expert. If you are a business based in Denmark, I recommend that you just call SCAT directly and they will tell you what you need to know. There are also some free courses that you can go to. I did that back in the day when I was starting. And I'm still not sure if I'm doing everything correctly. Whenever I have a question, I read on their site. They have a lot of information, also in English. There are also organizations like the International House in Copenhagen where you can go and ask for some help with that. And of course, you can always contact practicing accountants, which I try to do, but it's really hard to find one, apparently. So for now, I'm on my own and I hope I'm doing it right. And because I'm not 100% if I'm doing everything right, I will not be telling anyone how to do anything. Moving on. And now we have come to the cons, or why I don't really love Etsy all that much anymore. Sorry, Etsy. You're still okay, but you could be better. Anyway, so I feel like my first point is a little bit complex. I'm not sure I will make it justice. I think it might be explained better in the blog post because I had more time to think about it, write, edit, and all that. Even though I could have done even better job, but anyway, we'll try. So as I already said, Etsy is a platform, Etsy is a marketplace, and while in some regards that's a very good thing, in others it's actually a disadvantage for you as a seller. In the past 10 or so years, we've seen the rise of all these platforms like Uber, like Airbnb, like those food delivery services and so on, Fiverr for artists and creatives, and I have a huge problem with those, but it's not the time and place right now, so I'm going to try and make this brief and concise if I can. But basically, while they do have a lot of positives that they allow you to fairly quickly and easy start this side gig sort of thing, at the same time they are very, very exploitative for the people who actually bring the value or create the value of the platform. Again, this is a huge point, so I'm struggling to really explain it in a clear and easy to grasp way. They will force a lot of rules on you that don't make sense. They will hold you to standards that are completely unreasonable because that makes sense to them, that makes sense to their business model, not necessarily to you. And they will punish you at every corner as they like because they can. They can kick you out whenever they like. They can charge you for whatever they like. They don't have to answer to anyone. I have heard that when Etsy first started, it was really great. It was very friendly to the sellers. I've never experienced that stage because, as I said, I started in 2019. At this point, I think it was already sold and it was not at all what it was when it first started. I've never experienced that as either seller or buyer. I just was not aware of it. I think at the time when it started, I'm not even sure when that was, but I just know the stories of the glory days. But in the 3 short years I've been on it, I've seen a lot of things change for the worse, in my opinion. At the time when I was starting, they introduced this new sort of requirement, sort of suggestion that they encourage you to offer free shipping on orders over $35 or somewhere there, which is not a lot, and it can get expensive and it's not great, and I personally don't offer it. I've heard that if you do offer it, supposedly you get some kind of boost in the algorithm. I don't know, I've never tried, but yeah, it's things like that. I think I go more in depth with that in the blog post because there are many different things that have come up through the past few years that are very not great to deal with as a seller. Another thing is that they, as a platform, want to compete with Amazon and eBay and all these other big marketplaces, which sure, it makes sense for them, but it doesn't make sense for the sellers because a seller on Amazon is someone who probably resells products that they get from a factory or whatever, cheaply shipped from China, or that's very different from people who hand make their product. They make products in very small quantities like I do. Luckily, I don't make each and every card individually by hand, and I would not want to have a business like that because that would be just a way to burn out, I think. I don't know how these people who do that, how they manage, because it sounds exhausting, because you are held by the standards of those cheaply made goods, and you are expected to produce stuff as quickly as and cheaply as people working in sweatshops, and it's just not the same. And I mean, I can go on a rant about the sweatshops, but this is not the time and place. Basically, I feel like more and more as small art businesses are expected to compete with mass-produced factory goods, now probably AI for us artists. Basically, these are standards that a single individual just cannot meet, and we cannot offer this kind of prices. We cannot offer this kind of speed. We cannot ship overnight. We cannot not charge for shipping, and so on and so on. We can never compete on those points, and I hate that Etsy forces us to compete on these things, because that's not our selling point, and it shouldn't be. We are here to offer unique handmade products, and they take time and they take effort and they are expensive. So I feel like there needs to be space for that as well. But as it is, I'm not sure if there is. And this point makes me sad, and I want to be done with it. Moving on. Look at that. The next point is also something that will make me sad. And it's unfair competition, and more or less overlaps with the previous point, because from what I know, Etsy used to require from the sellers to make their products by hand, or that the products are like smaller quantities, more unique. For example, drop shipping was not allowed, is what I'm hearing, because I wasn't on Etsy at the time when that was a thing. Now it is, so we also compete with that. And of course someone might say, well, you just opt for drop shipping yourself, you don't have to compete with it, you can just, if you can't beat them, join them. But well, there are some of us who don't want to join them because we don't think this is right, because it is against our values, and that's something that's a problem in business for me in general, that a lot of good business practices are not something that I believe in. It's not something that I think is right. It's not something I think anyone should do. But a lot of people do it because they don't care, or because they want to be competitive. And everyone makes the choice for themselves, of course. For now, I am trying to stick to what feels right to me, even if it's not correct from a business standpoint. And it might be hurting my business, but if that's the case, so be it. I don't know, maybe a time will come when I'll be so desperate that I will just throw away my morals, but for now I just don't feel ready to do that. And I kind of think, I wish that there will be people who will stick with doing things according to their beliefs, even if it's not what the accepted way of doing things is. I don't want my products to be made by some desperate person in a shitty sweatshop who are being paid nothing, and they're working in horrible conditions just so that I can have the product produced extremely cheaply, so that I can sell it still quite expensive and make a lot more on the difference. It's just not right to me. But I also realize that's probably hurting me, but that's okay, I guess. It's not okay, but it's the world we live in right now. Next point is that on Etsy you don't own anything. You don't own the platform, you don't own your shop. What that means is that if at any point Etsy decides that for any reason you have violated their rules, they can close your shop, say goodbye, and that's it. You lose it all. That's not entirely unfair, because you won't scammers and so on to be kicked off the platform. But just because someone had their shop closed down doesn't mean they were a scammer. And well, this point is maybe a bit extreme. It probably won't happen to most people, but it's something to consider. I think you should never rely just on Etsy. You should always have your own platforms, your own community somewhere, your own way to reach people who enjoy what you make. Maybe through a website, blog, Instagram, whatever other social media where things are pretty uncertain as well. But the more ways you have to reach the people who are your audience, the better. And if you can own at least one of those channels, like for example your own website, I think that's a good thing, because at least that no one can take away from you. I mean, sure, maybe again it's some very extreme case, but it has to be even more extreme of a case. I think. And the next point is the ever-changing rules. The ways things work on Etsy are constantly evolving. In their view, they do that so that they can improve and be more competitive and get more of the market share and attract more of the customers, which should, in theory, be a good thing for you as well, but I feel like it's mostly good for the shareholders. So if you are one, then yeah, also for you. But what that usually means for you is that you have to constantly update yourself and play by new rules every so often. As I mentioned, for the 3 years that I've been on Etsy, things have changed a lot. And again, in my opinion, not really for the better for me. Most of these rules are not something that I am absolutely obligated to abide by, but if I don't, it hurts my shop. So for example, this is the free shipping policies. Now there is a tracking policies where they want you to track all the orders, which like I don't care, I don't mind tracking them, but where I live, there is a huge difference in price between sending a regular package and tracking that. There is like, it's like 4 or 5 times the base cost to get it tracked. I don't know if that made any sense. As an example, I think it costs about 24 krona to send the regular mail up to 100 grams within Denmark. And to do the same thing and add tracking and insurance, that would be 90 krona. So 24, 90. And I'm selling postcards. Who in their right mind will pay 90 krona to get shipped something that costs like 30? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I think if I was selling something big and expensive, like, I don't know, furniture or antiques or something like that, yeah, of course I would want to have it tracked and insured and all that. But when you sell tiny things that are not really that valuable, like if things go so wrong, if a package gets lost, it will still cost less to replace it than to have it tracked. It's just absolutely so stupid. So I do offer tracking as an option if a person wants to do that, but I'm not going to force it on people, because that would just mean no sales for me. And the thing is, when I don't do it, that hurts me in the algorithm. So I guess still less sales for me, but at least, I don't know, it's you can't win, basically. I think in the blog post I mentioned a bunch of other examples. I'm not gonna go into that right now. So I think with that, that's all the cons I have for Etsy for right now. It's quite a lot. Still, in conclusion, is it worth it? Well, I think it kind of is still. Especially if you're just starting, especially if you want to just test it out with a minimal cost, I would still recommend it. I think it's a good place to start. If you want to start with even less of a commitment, I would recommend going on a print-on-demand shop such as Redbubble, Society6, Imprint, you know, these. I had a Redbubble for a year or a few years before I started Etsy. I was just putting some of my illustrations on products there. And this, I guess, touches a bit on the issue with how products are made. I don't really know how well Redbubble, for example, treats their employees. So yeah, I hope it's decent. So, but that's the thing. When you work with a third party, you never know, and it is helpful in a way to work with third parties sometimes. So it's, I mean, you can't be perfect. So we cannot aim to be perfect, and for a business to be perfectly ethical. I really wish I can be, but I also have to accept that I can't, and I can at least try and minimize the harm as much as I'm aware of it. So what was I talking about? Yes, print-on-demand web shops. Yeah, I think it's a cheap and easy way. Try it out if you don't want to spend too much time. You don't have to do any kind of printing, packaging, or whatever. Actually, I just now realized that's very, I guess, art focused, or like same with photography or something. If you want to sell on Etsy because you sell jewelry, for example, print on demand websites and such just don't apply to you. I forgot to mention that in my intro, that all of this is from the perspective of someone who does illustration and puts it on stuff. But yeah, if you're just starting, my advice will be give Etsy a try. If you like it, if you think it's nice to have a shop and to do all the shop things like making products, packing them, shipping them, dealing with the customer communication and all that. If you're making decent sales, after a few years, start your own web shop. And then you have 2 shops. Maybe start a 3rd shop on another platform. I mean, why not? Anyway, hello folks, this is me from the future editing this video, and no matter what I do, I can't seem to get it under an hour, which is a bit much. So after asking you on Instagram, we've collectively decided to split it in 2 parts. One part will be focused on Etsy, and the second part will be about having your own website. And that means that this is the end of part 1. And if you cannot wait, go and check out the blog post. I will leave it in the description. And I hope this has been helpful. Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time in a week for part 2.